Hope, the Blue Whale, featuring artwork by ACS President Uko Gorder, inspired by Hope, the Blue Whale Lady, suspended in London's Museum of Natural History, available in 8 wearable styles, colors, and sizes. Grab yours today at the ACS merch shop on bonfire.com. The American Cetacean Society is excited to introduce Dr. Louisa Ponnampalam's talk on cetacean research and conservation on a shoestring, a Malaysian example. In many developing regions around the world, cetacean research efforts remain patchy. And while it is in those regions that cetaceans face many types of threats from human activities, conservation efforts remain a challenge due to limitations such as funds, manpower, and even a lack of awareness and empathy. Dr. Louisa Ponnampalam is the executive director and co-founder of the Marset Research Organization in Malaysia, an NGO she co-founded. Her career today is a testament that childhood dreams can come true with hard work and perseverance. Louisa has contributed to cetacean research in Thailand, Oman, Vietnam, and Myanmar, but has focused most on developing marine mammal science in Malaysia. Louisa was awarded the Pew Fellowship in Marine Conservation in 2014. The first Malaysian to be presented with this prestigious international award and the only female recipient for that year. Additionally, her efforts were recognized by her country when she was awarded the National Youth Premier Award 2014, special category, by the Malaysian government. She presently serves as a member of the IUCN Species Survival Commission's Cetacean and Sirenia Specialist Groups, and is a research associate at the Institute of Biodiversity and Environmental Conservation, University Malaysia Sarawak. Louisa currently co-supervises 4 postgraduate students and is mentor to various colleagues in the Southeast Asian region.
There is Louisa. Wonderful. Louisa, good to hear. Good to there. So can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Uko.
Hi, nice to meet you. And also thank you for contributing to our special whale watcher issue, the Women in Cetology. So that was wonderful to read about you. I'm not sure if you followed along here. We've had our previous speaker with Michelle Fournet had some internet issues. There were some issues that we have to see what happened. So that's unfortunate that we cut off. So we'll start with your talk a little sooner.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Okay, so Louisa, I'm going to let you share your screen and see how that goes. And then the moment I see that all's happening, I'll move away.
Okay, let me just do that now. Share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Perfect.
Okay.
I'll mute. Good.
Okay, thank you so much. So hello everybody, good evening if you're in the US, and good morning if you're here in Asia, and just good day wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for being here for my talk. I just want to say a very quick thank you to Uko and Sabina for having invited me to this ACS virtual conference. It's my first time presenting at an ACS conference. A shout out to any of my friends who are tuning in right now. So my name is Louisa. I am from a small grassroots marine conservation NGO here in Malaysia called Marset. And today I just want to share with you about my experiences and that of my team doing cetacean research and conservation here, which is predominantly done on a shoestring. So before I proceed, I just want to shout out to all my fellow Southeast Asian marine mammal research community and family. I just want to say that what I share today is not exactly unique to me or to my organization, but that all of us here in Southeast Asia, generally, we're all working on shoestrings, and we're all trying to pull together whatever resources we have to do research and conservation on varying species, all who are faced with conservation threats. So very quickly, I'm here in Malaysia. It is 8 a.m. on a Sunday. Where exactly is Malaysia? I just thought I'd share. We are right in the heart of Southeast Asia. We sit on the equator. We are sandwiched between Thailand to the north, Singapore to the south, and Indonesia on our west and on our east. Specifically, Malaysia is divided into two sections. One is Peninsular Malaysia, where I'm from. And that's the part that's connected to Thailand, and as well as East Malaysia, otherwise also known as Malaysian Borneo, which shares its borders with Brunei and Kalimantan in Indonesia on the big island of Borneo. You'll notice two red squares on the map, so just bear that in mind. Those are two places that I will mention in my talk in the next few slides, as that is the areas that we conduct our cetacean work in. So a little bit more about Malaysia. We are one of the mega biodiverse countries in the world. We rank 12 in the world for the amount of biodiversity we have. So we've been blessed with tropical rainforests, a lot of flora, and a lot of fauna. We are also a maritime country, and we are surrounded by a lot of sea. So we also have beautiful coral reef ecosystems. We have seagrass ecosystems, mangroves, as well as extensive coastline, beautiful extensive coastline. And I just want you to bear this in mind about this beautiful extensive coastline, because I will touch on it very quickly again in a while. I want to just backtrack a little bit and step back into history, just to give you a backstory of where this story all begins. Basically, what you're looking at right now is a photograph of a scrapbook that I've kept since I was about 10 years old. I became really obsessed and interested with marine life as a kid, and I would keep any newspaper article or magazine article that was about marine life into this scrapbook. And by the time I became a teenager, I developed an obsession for dolphins. Everybody in school started knowing me as the dolphin girl, because I would collect everything that had dolphins on it: necklaces, earrings, clothes, placemats, etc. You name it, I would have it. And I became so obsessed about becoming a marine biologist and a dolphin scientist that I always said that one day when I grow up, I would go off to study all about dolphins abroad and return home to Malaysia someday to set up my very own institution, as it were. And so that's exactly what I did. I finished high school and I embarked abroad for about 10 years to get my degrees in marine biology and my PhD in dolphin ecology. And I returned home to Malaysia in about 2008 to begin this lifelong dream of doing research work on dolphins in Malaysia, as well as to protect them. I was very fortunate that upon my return, and when I was applying for some jobs, I was very fortunate to have been competing with this guy here. His name is Fairul, for the same job. He got the job in the end, but we soon became good friends. And in talking to him, I too found out that he has a shared vision for marine mammal research and conservation in Malaysia. growing up, when I was obsessing about doing this sort of work, it was quite difficult to get a lot of information about dolphins in Malaysia. So it was really nice to see that I had found somebody who shared the same dream and vision as me. And I also learned that just like myself, Fairul had this childhood ambition of doing this sort of work. His story, in a nutshell, begins with his very first sighting of a whale, which was actually a gray whale, which he had seen off the coast of California when he was about 10. And that magical moment enthralled him forever, and he was sold on the idea. So we talked about what we could do together, collaboratively. And as we started working together, trying to identify areas where we could do this work, we actually started discovering some sort of a problem. And what was this problem? So I think here at this conference today, we have a lot of people who love whales and dolphins, who are enthusiasts. It's a very common thing that cetaceans target people's heartstrings. We've seen them on TV, and we love them. It's not difficult to convince most people about falling in love with cetaceans. But what we found here in Malaysia as we were embarking on this journey was that these were the questions that would be posed to us. There are whales and dolphins in Malaysia? Where? Are you pulling my leg? I thought they only exist in cold countries. And surely any whale and dolphin here is only passing through. So at first, we were both quite taken aback and shocked that these were the questions that people would ask us. And these are genuine questions. They weren't trying to be funny. It was then that we realized that there was really a lot to be done, because the level of awareness about cetaceans, about marine mammals in our country was really so low. There were a lot of misconceptions. And this issue, so to speak, was further compounded by the fact that a lot of people we found were confused about whether marine mammals were mammals or fish. So, of course, a cetacean and a fish, take for example a shark, have pretty much the same general external morphology, or at least they look similar. I mean, it's not the same, but they look similar. They all have dorsal fins, they all have pectoral fins, and they also have tails. And it didn't help that in our national language, Bahasa Malaysia, dolphins are called ikan lumba-lumba and whales are called ikan paus. And the word ikan actually means fish in our national language. So when you say ikan lumba-lumba, obviously there is a perception that, oh, these animals are fish. So we realized that the awareness levels about the existence of these animals in our waters is low, but also that people were getting confused, or they thought that these cetaceans are fish. And then you throw in the whale shark, right? A lot of people always come to me and say, hey, I went diving last weekend and I saw whale sharks and I thought you'd like to know. You're studying them, right? And I'd always have to explain that I study marine mammals, so I do study dolphins, but a whale shark is actually a shark and not a whale. And it's named so by virtue of its size, being the largest fish in the sea, therefore it's called a whale shark. So these are the sort of things that we realize we have to fix. So never mind conservation issues or what species do we have or where are they found. Such basic things needed to be addressed. Anyway, time went on and Fairul and I worked together on a few small projects. And finally, we decided that we wanted to start our own thing. We wanted to start our own organization so that we could do more and we could do things in the way that we saw needed to be done. And I tell you, our families were supportive of the idea, but there were so many naysayers around. Truly, there were people who laughed at us. They thought that we were crazy for wanting to start our own organization. And many of them suggested, why not team up with larger organizations that were already in existence? And we didn't really want to do that for various reasons. So people laughed at us. They asked us things like, will you even have enough marine mammals around to study? How are you ever going to sustain yourself? How are you going to fund your work? How are you going to have money to buy equipment or pay salaries? Are you even going to survive? And a lot of them didn't think that we would make it. And I almost allowed myself to believe all those things for a split second, but in the end, Farrell and I decided, no, we're just going to go ahead because we have these dreams and we've held it for so long. We talked about this idea of setting up our own thing for 2 years because we were so afraid to really take that plunge. And we thought we needed a lot of money to start our organization. But finally, we said, let's just do it with whatever we have. And we discovered that it didn't cost much to register a nonprofit here. And so we did. And so that was in 2012. This here, you will see, I just wanted to quickly share, is photographs from our very first fundraiser in 2012. We finally got over our nerves. We got ourselves registered. Now we needed to open our bank account, but we had no money to put into this bank account to start it. So what did we do? Over the next 6 months, we collected junk from everyone that we could ask for junk, from our friends, our family, our neighbors. We said, please donate to us anything that you no longer want. It could be books, clothes, accessories, kitchenware, pots and pans, etc. And we collected all this over 6 months. My mom nearly threatened to throw me out of the house because I was collecting all this junk and leaving it in her storeroom. And finally, over a 3-day weekend in a very deserted shopping mall, as you can see, because it was the only place that we could get a free space to do the garage sale. But over 3 days, we set ourselves up and we managed to raise about $1,300 to finally open our bank account so that we could finally get to work. And that was really a proud moment for us. But of course, $1,300 isn't much, and we would still need more to actually get projects underway. When we first started working together, Farrell and I, we were looking at the map and wondering, where can we go? We have a lot of coastline. We are based in Kuala Lumpur, so we could really go anywhere. And we had some people tell us that here in the Langkawi Archipelago, which is a UNESCO Global Geopark. It is also the oldest landmass in Malaysia that is about 550 million years old in geology. It's an archipelago of more than 99 islands, has dense tropical forest cover. It's a beautiful place with high biodiversity. And we had some people tell us that there are these pink dolphins that they've seen around Langkawi. So we thought, oh, okay, maybe we can go there and try and see whether we can set up a project there. Also because Langkawi is one of the top tourism destinations here in Malaysia, so we thought a place with some overlap with human activities would be good, because then surely these areas would have issues that we could look at so that we could find solutions for it. So we ventured out to Langkawi to establish our project in 2010. So this was actually 2 years before we even established MARISAT, which is the organization that we established after the garage sale and everything. And so we went to Langkawi with really zero expectations. We just heard that there are dolphins there, and we thought, okay, we managed to secure some small grants to start the project there. And we asked some very basic questions. What species is found there? Where are they distributed? How many might there be? And what are the human activities in the area? We wanted to understand what were the conservation needs of any cetacean that we might find in this area. So over here, you can see photographs of our setup in the early days. We had a very small core team of just Farrell and myself. We had small funding from a few small grants that we managed to secure. And a lot of the funding was taken up by traveling to Langkawi, which we had to take flights. It's a 45-minute domestic flight. A lot of the funding was taken up from renting boats. So every single cent was so precious, but we had very basic gear, you can see. So the boat has no shade. We didn't come with any fancy equipment. We have and we still use a handheld depth sounder to take depth readings in the water. But we had big aspirations. What were we going to find here? And this was to be what would help us really kick off our careers in doing this work that we dreamed of all along. So on the very first survey, actually, we didn't see any of these purported pink dolphins. What we found were these Indo-Pacific finless porpoise. Yep, that's pretty much it. They often look like floating coconuts or floating rubber tires. I cannot tell you how many times we've been deceived by the illusion that it was a porpoise at all, because someone would shout sighting, and then we would head up there and only to find that it was, a floating coconut. So this species, I've come to love it as one of favorite species of mine, because we learned that in Langkawi they are there, and I've come to understand their habits a little bit more and find that they're not exactly all that is when you first see them. That they do get a little bit more exciting if you give it a bit of time to study them. So I wanted to just share with you a video that we managed to take of this very elusive species. So the moment the sea gets a little bit rough or the swell height increases, it's so easy to just not be able to spot them. So we've had to have many years of training our eyes trying to spot these dots in the water. But here's a video I'd like to share that we took, which was a good day, a good sighting day of this species. My team would like to call it the best finless porpoise video in the world. And I'll just play it for you. So that's on a good day when they're actually surfacing quite actively out of the water, and you can see their head. So they're called finless porpoise because they lack a dorsal fin, unlike most other cetaceans. Finless porpoises are the only porpoise species that is found in Southeast Asia as well as in Malaysia. And they're rather small, about 2 meters. They have a rounded head, and they are a very dark, ashy gray color. So we found that Langkawi is one of the best places in the region, if I might say, to see this species. We tend to see them quite a lot. Even when we're not looking for them, they tend to pop up. And I'll mention a little bit more about them later on. We also then, on the second survey that we ever conducted in Langkawi, was when we finally found the pink dolphins. As we now know, these are the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins. So we found them in Langkawi. And I remember this was November 2010 when we first sighted them. I cannot describe to you the feeling of excitement that we felt because, finally, because we were starting to think that maybe whoever who told us about these dolphins got mistaken or had thought they saw dolphins but didn't. And so finally we saw it, and I want to just mention that these animals are beautiful. They're the only pink dolphin species here in Malaysia as well as in Southeast Asia. Calves are born gray. They almost look like a bottlenose dolphin when they're born. You can see the photograph here in the inset. That's a calf leaping out of the water. So they're born gray, but as they mature, they turn this mottled gray pink coloration. So our dolphins, by the time they reach full maturity, I would say they're about 80% pink and 20% gray. This here is an individual known to us as Pink Steps. We've been seeing her since 2010. Another way to get around our very small budget, because everything was on a shoestring, was to try and understand where cetaceans are distributed around the islands, and whether fishermen were seeing them, and to understand where fishermen were fishing and seeing these animals. We conducted a series of interview surveys with fishermen around the archipelago as well as over on the mainland side. So Langkawi is situated about 24 kilometers off from the peninsular Malaysia mainland, and there are ferries, speed ferries, that connect the two areas. So this is a low-cost method which is used in many developing regions, because it costs almost nothing to do these interviews except having to get to the place. So we wanted to understand, was bycatch happening? Where are fishermen fishing? When do they see dolphins? And also, how do they feel about conservation? So over the years, we've established a database of dolphin dorsal fins, particularly for the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins. We're often asked if we tag our animals. Now, when you're on a shoestring budget, tagging is really a very luxurious thing, and it's expensive as well. So one of the ways that we tag our dolphins are to take photographs of them. And I think in our catalog today, we have about 400 plus animals and counting. And so we're able to recognize these different animals from the scarring pattern as well as the pigmentation pattern on these dorsal fins. So because they do turn this pink gray mottling, and different dolphins have different pigmentation patterns, we are able to use both pigmentation patterns as well as scarring patterns to identify them. And I tell you, sometimes we have to look really, really closely because some of these pigmentation patterns are so similar. Oh, and I just wanted to mention that we use this to look at population abundance estimation, as well as to look at ranging patterns in the area. Now, the continuity of our program in Langkawi was not guaranteed from year to year. As I mentioned, we had small budgets, and we would always have to plan a year ahead or in the year before to ensure that we would have enough funding to keep going in the following year and the following year. And one of the things as well that we were very lucky was to be able to over time expand our team. And I just want to mention a little bit here about Sandra. Sandra is now part of our team. She's the one who's managing the project today while I run the organization. She first sent me an email some years ago saying that she was looking for a postgraduate opportunity to study dolphins. And she wanted to save the dolphins. And I thought, oh, this girl, does she even understand what does saving the dolphins mean? Because as I had to learn, conservation is not a simple, straightforward path. Nonetheless, her CV checked out as being quite impressive, and I thought, okay, I'll give her a chance to see what are her interests and if we could recruit her to the team, because after all, we needed to grow our team. So together, we applied for this Conservation Leadership Program, Future Conservationist Award. In 2016, we were so happy and so fortunate to be awarded this very competitive award, and Sandra was awarded it really. And that enabled us to continue our work and, in fact, expand across the water from the Langkawi archipelago, expand our research site to the mainland. I'd always wondered what was found across on the mainland. I'd always wondered, do these animals that we've been studying around Langkawi move and travel across to the mainland? Because it's not very far in a cetacean, in cetacean terms to swim about 24 kilometers. So with this extra new funding, we were able to continue and expand, where we also discovered that there are Irrawaddy dolphins living along the mainland coasts. So Irrawaddy dolphins, they look rather similar to finless porpoises. To the untrained eye, at least, they would look rather similar. They have a rounded head, just like finless porpoises do. They are light gray in color, but they do have a dorsal fin. They are a dolphin, not a porpoise, and they are slightly larger as well. So Sandra has been researching on the dolphins' social structure in the area and looking at their ranging patterns and trying to understand how human activities are driving and shaping these social structures. And so this is how we were able to expand some of the work that we've been doing since 2010. And then further along, since 2018, so this would be 8 years now that we've been studying the dolphins there. We've seen them visually, we've observed their behavior, but we know that cetaceans rely a lot on underwater sounds for communication. And I've always wondered, how is the sounds in their habitat and all the human activities and boat traffic in the environment, how do they impact the behavior of these dolphins? So with some collaborators in Kyoto University in Japan, I took on a new student, a Malaysian student. Her name is Saliza. She had just finished her master's degree in Aberdeen in Scotland, where she had researched harbor porpoises over there. And I asked her, hey, would you like to join the team perhaps and look at studying dolphins in Langkawi here in Malaysia to understand their acoustic ecology and if sounds were impacting these dolphins. And she jumped on that opportunity. I'm so glad for that. And we managed to secure a little bit more funding to fund her research. We also had some very generous donors who helped us with purchasing hydrophones. So here's a photograph, as you can see, of how we do it. We drop the hydrophone in the water when we see some dolphins, and we record their sounds, and we record their observed surface behavior as well, and any boats that might be around. So Langkawi has a lot of boat traffic. This is one of it. These are speed ferries that ply between the mainland and the island. And very often we see dolphins swimming right in the path of the speed ferries travel routes. So of course that puts them at risk of collision and of course sound masking with their communication. So with the work that we're doing on acoustics now, we're trying to understand how are boat noises impacting the way they communicate, and does it have any negative effects on them and their welfare? Next, I want to move on and talk a little bit about this place, about 200 kilometers south on the same coastline, 200 kilometers south of Langkawi. The Matang mangroves. This was another area of interest because, again, I've been hearing that there are these pink dolphins that come into the river estuaries. Matang mangroves is located in the state of Perak. It is one of Malaysia's most important fisheries areas. There's a lot of fishing activity that goes on near shore and offshore. The Matang mangroves itself is part of a production forest that has a centuries-old system of felling the trees, which was handed down to our foresters from the British colonial days. There are these very rustic and quaint fishing villages that are still on stilts that are about 200 plus years old in the area. The area has extensive mudflats, so the area gets really shallow, even all the way up to about 4 or 5 miles offshore. It barely reaches 10 meters depth. And of course, it's also a place of high biodiversity. So in 2010, we established the Matang Dolphin Research Project. Again, I was able to take on a student for this purpose, and we applied for some small money, again, to look at the basics of what is found there, where are they distributed, how many are there, and what are the human activities in the area. So the area is large, and it is fed by 5 large estuaries that drain out into the Straits of Malacca coastline. And as you can see from the logo as well as from this map here, the area has a very extensive and complex riverine waterway. So we wanted to study these pink dolphins that we had heard about over there. Again, with a small core team, very small funding, basic gear, and an even more basic boat, as you can see. We began the work in 2013. This is Vivian. I will mention her a little bit later on, but she is the project leader for this particular project. And she and the rest of the team, they are survivors, because in 2014, while they were on a survey, and I was actually in San Francisco at the time, they met with a capsize incident. The research vessel capsized, and we lost everything. I mean, thankfully, no loss of lives, nobody was injured, but we lost all the equipment that we had, all our precious basic equipment, our binoculars, our cameras, GPS, and everything. It was a real blow to us because, again, when you're on a shoestring, every little thing is so important. But thankfully, we had a lot of friends and supporters who scrambled very quickly to do crowdfunding to help us raise enough money to recover all the items that we had lost. Nonetheless, it didn't deter the team from continuing on with the surveys subsequently. And so what we found was that, yes, there are these Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins in the area. This is Matang's waters on a good day. This is considered clear. The water is generally brown and tannin-like because of the environment that it is in, which is soft, muddy bottom. And of course, Irrawaddy dolphins. So most of the fishermen, when we speak to them, they only talk about the pink dolphins, because these are the dolphins that come right into the estuaries and sometimes up the riverine waterways and close to shore. So this is what fishermen are mostly seeing. But then what we found was that Irrawaddy dolphins do inhabit this coast as well. And we also found that finless porpoises also inhabit the area at large. So this is what I was saying earlier about floating rubber tires and floating coconuts. So what have we learned about those cetaceans after all this while? I decided, there isn't enough time to share about everything, but I decided to pick some fun facts and highlights to share with you today. So in Langkawi, what we found is that the cetaceans are distributed quite widely throughout our survey region, from Langkawi Archipelago all the way to the mainland. We found that Irrawaddy dolphins, as you can see from the orange dots, they're only distributed along the mainland. We have not seen any at all around the Langkawi Archipelago. And finless porpoises have quite an ubiquitous distribution all around the island, through the channel that separates the island and the mainland, and as well as along the coastline. And the pink dots are humpback dolphins. You can see they very much love to hug the coast for the most part. But what we were also very surprised to find, starting in 2011, was that in the offshore waters of our survey site, we would also see Bryde's whales. So that was very exciting. I remember still the feeling of seeing that first blow back in 2011. And I was like, is that a whale? Is that a whale that I'm seeing? But this is slightly further offshore, and we don't see them often if we're doing these near-shore surveys. So what we found is that these dolphins and porpoises are distributed year-round. We see calves year-round in the survey area. And especially for the finless porpoise and the humpback dolphins, you can see that their habitat very much overlaps. And we've been trying to figure out how is it that they can coexist in the same area. And I'll mention something about this in my next few slides. Moving along to Matang, we found that the separation of species along the coastline was very clear. First, you have the humpback dolphins, which are very much coastal, very much inshore. You can see they go right up into the estuaries. But some have also been found offshore in the coastal areas. And it's still early days at looking at this data set in terms of the inshore and offshore dolphins. But it appears that the coastal dolphins don't actually mix with these inshore dolphins, that they are of different groups. So you have in Matang these ones that love the estuaries and they're always found hugging the coast, and then there are these occasional coastal ones that we see that do not come right up to the estuaries. And then you can see that for Irrawaddy dolphins, they are distributed throughout the coastal waters. They do come close to shore, but they do not go right up into the estuaries like humpback dolphins do. So they have a wider distribution, probably because they can exploit a wider range of prey. and I guess to kind of spread out and even out the, we don't want crowding maybe, and to spread out the food resources, they occupy that coastal swath. And finless porpoises are found the furthest from the shore in Matang. You can see very clearly they don't come close to the estuaries at all. We start seeing them starting from about anything from 7 to 8 meters depth onwards and outwards. So we believe that in our study area, if we were to go more towards the westwards, we would probably capture a lot more finless porpoise sightings than we did within this study area that we have. So one of the things that we found in Langkawi is that the humpback dolphins form what we call superpods. In general, this species are usually found in small groups, sometimes in pairs, groups of 5, up to a dozen. This is very common for humpback dolphins throughout their range. However, in Langkawi, we've been seeing really big superpods. The very first time we came across a superpod, we estimated the group size to be about 55. But once we had finished processing the photographs and cataloging each animal that we had photographed, the number raised to more than 120 animals in the group. And that's when we realized, wow, we had to learn how to estimate these animals when we see them. So over time, we've learned that, and these superpods are not all the time. We see them every so often. And what we've noticed is that superpods are mainly comprised of mother and calf and juvenile groups. So perhaps they're traveling, by safety in numbers. They're always traveling. So superpods are always on the go. We've always seen them traveling southwards for some reason. So we're still trying to understand what these superpods are doing when they come together. And I think to date, the largest group that we have recorded is about 180 animals in a group, which is really, really big for this species. So that's very exciting. And we've only seen these superpods in Langkawi, but not in our other field site in Matang. We've also been very fortunate to observe herding and mating behavior in Irrawaddy dolphins. Generally, this species of dolphins are very evasive. It's very hard to get up close enough to them to take good photographs of their dorsal fins because they're just very shy. However, we found that when they engage in herding and mating behavior, they really couldn't care less. So you could come close enough to take photographs of them and observe their behavior, and they don't mind. So we were very fortunate in Matang, I think in 2013 or 2014, to observe this group that started out very coy, but eventually that momentum built up and this group started herding and engaging in this mating behavior because for obvious reasons we could determine that this was what was going on. And then we found that in Langkawi, we also had the opportunity to observe another mating event. And we found that in comparison to Irrawaddy dolphins, it appears that male humpback dolphins have a more slender and whip-like penis. And funny story, this was actually on a day that it was Sandra, as I mentioned her earlier, it was her birthday. So we think that the dolphins had appeared to wish her happy birthday. So it was a very nice sighting to observe this behavior that we would otherwise not be able to observe very often. And what we found also, especially with the humpback dolphins, is that they love eating catfish. We've been collecting a lot of catfish heads while we observe these dolphins over the years, but we never really had the chance to see how they go after the catfish. So this is a photograph of the dolphin already halfway through eating the catfish. But it started with a sighting where there was a lot of surface activity and a very big tail slap. And after a while, the team saw this catfish float to the surface, sort of wriggling around, and the dolphin surfaces again and comes from behind to eat it. So we now know that the Sagor catfish in our field sites is a favorite on the menu of humpback dolphins. Here was after a feeding bout that we collected about I think it was 15 3, 4, 5, 6 catfish heads here. And what we noticed was that these dolphins are really smart because they have mastered the art of eating the catfish body only. Why? You can see here that the catfish head has a lot of sharp spines on the dorsal fin and the pectoral fin. Now these spines are really sharp. I've been poked before by the spines, and they do leave quite an owie. And the spines are not just sharp but serrated at the tip. So I guess the dolphins are really smart in that they've learned how to just eat the body and leave the head behind so that they don't hurt themselves. And even though this catfish has a very hard bony plate on its head, as you can see, we're able to collect the heads because they float to the surface after the dolphins have eaten the body, because you can see here the swim bladder is usually still intact. So the swim bladder is what allows the catfish head to float to the surface, and for us to scoop it up so that we can study the size, to try and understand are the dolphins selecting these catfish based on size or maybe even the sex of the fish. We've also observed our dolphins chasing after squid. So we know that they do eat squid sometimes. This was a very lucky photograph that we managed to capture of a dolphin that had just been pursuing a squid. And of course, the squid lived that day. The squid lived to see another day, but in its escape, it had squirted out a lot of squid ink that just flew right into the air. And in the inset, you can see that was the same squid that was trying to hide under its squid ink, hoping that nobody would see it. We saw it, but I think the dolphin didn't, and sort of just left it alone after that. So it was very lucky on that day. And then we have Irrawaddy dolphins. Irrawaddy dolphins are known to spit water. This is not unique just to our site, but throughout the range of the Irrawaddy dolphins. But we've been very fortunate to be able to capture this on video as well as photograph, because it happens really quickly and very unexpectedly. So what is it? Is it a matter of bad manners or just a way of getting prey? So there are two theories. One is that spitting water is to stun the fish prey before they capture the fish to eat. And the other is that it is thought that Irrawaddy dolphins feed through suction feeding. And so by sucking in water, it helps keep the small prey in for them to swallow before they have to spit that water out again eventually. So it's really exciting when we get to see this, but really don't blink your eye because you'll miss it. And then we also found that one of the ways to know what a dolphin is doing is by looking out for signs of mud on its body. So it turns out not just water buffaloes get muddy, but our dolphins get really muddy too. So you can see here on the dorsal fins, there's a lot of mud. And sometimes the whole body is covered in mud. And that's when we know that they've been feeding and digging around in the soft, muddy bottom, looking for octopus, looking for catfish, prawns, and other fish prey that live on the muddy bottom. And for a long time, we wondered, as I mentioned earlier, how does finless porpoises and humpback dolphins share the same habitat? At least in Langkawi, we've looked at things like distance to shore and maybe time of day and tide. But what we're finding is that perhaps how they are coexisting is because they prefer different types of prey. So through various carcasses that have washed ashore that we've been able to sample, we have looked at the stomach contents, and we're finding that finless porpoises tend to eat more cephalopods, so squids, octopus, as well as cuttlefish, while humpback dolphins prefer to eat fish. They do eat cephalopods, but we find that mainly in their stomach contents, we find fish. And of course, sometimes catfish remains. So the sargal catfish that they eat, we cannot see those remains in the stomach because they only take the body. And usually the fish remains that we look out for in a dolphin stomach content are the otoliths, the ear bones. But because if they don't eat the head, we can't know that they've eaten the sago catfish just from looking at the stomach contents. But we know from observing their feeding behavior that they do eat these catfish. Nonetheless, we know that they eat other fish as well, and that cephalopods don't form a big portion of their diets, at least in Langkawi. But finless porpoises, on the other hand, eat very little fish and mainly focus on cephalopods. So that's quite exciting to know. We also know that marine debris is an issue. Here we have fan-belt the dolphin in Langkawi that was observed in 2017 with this gnarly boat engine fan belt wrapped around its body. So obviously it was a victim of trash floating in the sea. You can see the photograph here. We've seen many dolphins swimming in a sea of trash, which is really not pleasant at all. I think in Asia, a lot of the trash from the land gets mismanaged and washed out into the sea. Malaysia is not an exception. And so this is one of the issues that is impacting our dolphins. Very luckily for fan belt, we didn't see it again in 2018, so we were really worried. We thought maybe it didn't make it. But in 2019, September, we saw it again, and it had managed to free itself from this object. However, it, having been stuck with it for quite a while, fan belt today is with a disfigured dorsal fin as well as scars on the flank of its body. We've also found that our dolphins are rather resilient in a sense that we see a lot of dolphins with a lot of deep previous wounds that are cut deep into their body. We see a lot of dolphins that have lost their dorsal fins, that have disfigured dorsal fins. But what we've noticed is that many of them have gone on to become mothers. So this is what I call our resilient mamas. On the top here, you can see on the top right is a grace. Grace is a dolphin that almost has no more dorsal fin. You can see in the inset that her tail flukes, the tips of her tail flukes are also gone. She probably got snagged in something some while ago and survived it, but it's left her, quite disfigured. And then in the bottom, we have Flop. Flop has also a very deep gash in the front of its dorsal fin, at the base of its dorsal fin, as well as a severely disfigured dorsal fin where her fin is now flopped over on the right-hand side. But they're a reminder to me and my team that if they are resilient enough to survive so much trauma, then despite any challenge that is thrown to us, we need to be resilient enough to keep fighting for them, to ensure their survival into the future. And another thing I want to touch on about finless porpoises, as I mentioned earlier, is that finless porpoises really are most people's totally unfavorite species because they're just not exciting to look at all at sea. But there is a cause for concern. I think that they are a lot more at risk than we realize and a lot more at risk than we care to notice. Now, if a whale was to strand on the beach, it would make it into the news. There would be a lot of hype around, this whale that had stranded, whether dead or alive. But often, incidences of finless porpoises washing ashore dead are, no one really bats an eyelid. It's like, oh, it's just another porpoise. But what we've been finding from collating all this information on stranding incidents on finless porpoises is that finless porpoises are found dead very often and often very decomposed. So it's very hard to know what happened to them, but we would not want to discount fisheries interaction and any other kind of trauma. Of course, we also get other species, humpback dolphins, Irrawaddy dolphins that do strand, but I think this is one of the things that really raised the flag with me was that we need to look at them closer, that even though they may not be the most exciting of species to look at, but they might be really under threat right under our noses and just slipping away unnoticed. As Eric might have spoken to you earlier about IMAs, important marine mammal areas, I'm very happy to say that after all the research work that we've been doing since 2010 till present, we were able to nominate our field sites as important marine mammal areas. And it went through the peer review process, just like all other nominated areas. And in 2019, our field sites received this international designation as an IUCN important marine mammal area. And this really is helpful because while it is not a official marine protected area on the ground, it gives us a basis to push forward for conservation in these areas. So I've spoken a lot about some of the research that we do, and it's been a lot, and we've really done it on a shoestring. Yet we've managed to do a lot because we had to very carefully plan how we utilize our funds. But when Fairul and I first started out doing these projects, we thought this is it. Childhood ambitions fulfilled, and we would study dolphins for the rest of our lives. But is that so? Would we do research till happily ever after? And the answer is no, because we soon realized that the research has to do more than just research. The research has to transcend into different arenas, because what about conservation impacts? So one of the things in the last 5-6 years that Marisette has really tried to do, using all the information that we have gathered from the early years. So in the early years, we couldn't do much outreach because we didn't have the information. But after a few years, we started gathering enough information that we could share with people about our work. So one of the things that we've worked really hard, with any last bit of funding that we have from our research grants, we put it into marine education programs for local schools, for the general public, for private groups of people as well. And we found that variety is essential. So we should translate the science that we do into marine education, but by placing it in different kinds of activities. So we do lectures, we have hands-on activities where kids can pretend and sort of train to feel what it's like to be a cetacean scientist. We let them look at specimens to know, what, for example, what a dolphin or a porpoise skull looks like, what are the differences. And of course, we also try to expose them a little bit to other marine life and things like plankton, which forms the basis of the food web. So variety is essential to keep things interesting so that we get to keep the attention of the target audience. We've also started in 2019 what we call the Whales on the Wheels Marine Education Mobile Truck. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we couldn't do this last year, but we're hoping that with this we are able to travel around. It is our dream and hope that we can do a nationwide tour of our Whales on the Wheels. Hopefully this year, once hopefully pandemic is over and things reopen, so that we can bring our marine mammal laboratory out to more people, to little towns and little villages where this information might be harder to obtain. So this was really one way to get that information out to a wider crowd. We also ensure that we translate our science into training the local communities where we work. So this ranges from hotel staff to vet students, fishers, tour operators, and nature guides. We've had workshops to show vet students how they could do some basic sampling on marine mammal carcasses. We've had stranding response training for local communities in the areas where we work, an introduction to marine mammals so that fishermen could help us with data collection, or they know what they're looking at. They can know what to do if a dolphin got entangled in their nets, and also what to do if they chanced upon a stranded animal alive on the beach. So these are some of the things that we do to ensure that the science is translated to the wider community. And of course, excuse me, we always want to ensure that our science is translated for use in national policy and plans, in conservation planning. So in the early years when we were, nobody really knew who Marisette was yet, we really had to knock on a lot of doors to say, hey, we want to share our information, we want to share our results with you so that you could take it into consideration for conservation planning. These days, it's a little easier. People know who Marisette is, and we do get invited to these meetings and roundtable discussions to contribute our work. But I'm very proud to say that we've been a part of at least a collective 8 international and local policy instruments where we had direct involvement in their development. And even one of it was in the development of a management plan for a proposed dugong sanctuary. So I'm not talking about dugongs today because today is all about cetaceans, but this is some of the work that we've done and how we've used that science to put it into policy and planning. One of the things that we've learned very early on, when you're on a shoestring budget, is that the power of volunteers to really help advance the work that you wish to do. So we have so much gratefulness, and we are forever indebted to all the volunteers that we've had from day one who have given their time so freely, not just in field work, but in things like data organization, data entry, at public marine education events, at booth events to help us sell our merchandise, beach cleanup events, helping us process stinky carcasses. Volunteers really form the core of our workforce, especially in the early years when it was really just Spiral and myself. We couldn't have done it without the help of volunteers, helping us with equipment, carrying equipment, preparing the equipment for the day, washing it down, and etc. So if you're on a shoestring budget, just remember that volunteers are really, really important. And they give to us, obviously, their time, which is great. And of course, in exchange, hopefully they also get a really good experience being able to experience this field of work. And of course, the power of social media. Today we're very fortunate to live in an age where social media is the thing. And when you're on a small budget and you don't have a big PR machinery, what do? You can turn to social media. So we've really used social media to put out information from the work that we do in various formats. So we've put out infographics for people to learn more about cetaceans in general and cetaceans in Malaysia. We've put out notices to ask people to help us be our eyes on the water, to be a citizen scientist and report to us sightings. We've produced some very simple videos that we launch every so often, and we put it on our YouTube channel, Mariset TV, as well as on our Facebook page, just to get a message across about marine conservation. And of course, often people think that a lot of what I do, what my team does, is that we're swimming with the dolphins on a daily basis, and we're always on a boat. But a lot of people don't realize that marine mammal science goes beyond that. And sometimes it involves working in the lab. Sometimes it involves processing things like stinky stomach content. So we use social media to shed light on the behind the scenes of the work that we do, so that people have a better understanding and appreciation of, what's out there and the kind of work that happens. And hopefully to reduce the number of people asking, are there whales and dolphins in Malaysia? Yeah, so that's one of the ideas behind that. At Mariset, we've also really emphasized on building local science and conservation leadership. Again, when it was just Farrell and myself, we needed a team, and we knew that we need to build up a good foundation and a strong team, a Malaysian team to do this work, and of course to carry on someday as well. So I just wanted to share two examples of how we do it. We want to recognize individual strengths and interests. So we have a lot of volunteers, and some volunteers, they have stayed on with us through the years. But the important thing is to recognize people's strengths, what they are capable of, and also their interests. It's good to tailor the conservation leadership and science mentorship accordingly to strengths and interests. So here is Vivian. As you saw her earlier, she leads our Matang project. This is her in 2010, helping us as a volunteer on a survey, putting up these posters around fishermen jetties around Langkawi. A few years later, I took her on as a student, so she started working on the Matang project, and she has since grown and developed into a rather accomplished cetacean scientist herself as she does her PhD. This is her at the World Marine Mammal Conference in Barcelona in 2019, where she was awarded some Best Student Award Best Student Presentation Award, which we were really proud of. And today she's on track to submitting her PhD thesis really soon, next month. So this is the kind of growth, she's experienced, and we've seen her grow, where she started out as this dolphin enthusiast who came to volunteer with us, and then went on to pursue her PhD, which she's about to submit. And I can see that she's really grown into becoming a really good cetacean scientist, a critical thinker, and conservationist. And it's been really good to have her on the team doing a lot of this scientific work that we do. Another example here is Jo-eun. So Jo-eun is here. This is 2012. Again, she had just come on as a volunteer on our surveys, and that's her towing a dead turtle to the shore to hand over to the authorities. Jo-eun, today, she has stayed with us through the years. Today, she is our outreach and education coordinator. So she coordinates and plans a lot of the education programs that we run at Mariset. And she also she oversees the development of the merchandise that we produce for fundraising, which I will mention in a while. So you can see that they both started as volunteers, and they've somehow stayed on with us in the organization, and we've been able to tap into their different interests and their different strengths, and collectively, we it's good synergy. It's all the things that we need in a team. And of course, we have a few more members in the team, but I just wanted to show you two examples. And I think as much as we're so grateful for all the volunteers who have come and helped us in every way, in any way. We're really, really proud to say that at least 15% of our volunteers have gone on to pursue a career in marine science or conservation. And that's really encouraging to know that through the programs that we have offered, we were able to encourage and inspire these young people to go on to pursue their dreams in really a career that is not really looked upon as a sensible career choice to go into because it can't make you money, and I guess it's just not as important or perceived as not being very important. So it's really nice to know that at least 15% of them have gone on to pursue this career. So as I mentioned about fundraising and merchandise, one of the other things, that we've had to do over the years is that we have had to fundraise. And so apart from the usual ways of fundraising through getting research grants and corporate partnerships and sponsorships, as well as public donations, one of the things that we like to do at Mariset is to fundraise with a difference. We like to support local livelihoods while trying to fundraise for our conservation cause. And we always like to come from it at an angle where we're developing a product that has a related story, a story that links back to the animals that we study, that we are trying to conserve, and that also links back to the local culture and heritage. So here you can see on the bottom right is us in the process of getting that batik fabric. So batik is a very Malaysian thing. I mean, you find it throughout Southeast Asia, but it's also a very Malaysian thing. And we've come up with our very own dolphin batik fabric, which we have turned into beautiful bags, beautiful beach parios. We've worked with some women on an island just off Langkawi who are master weavers in this screw pine leaves we call mengkuang, and they weave it into a mat, and we've gotten them to customize and make these beautiful keychains for us in the shape of tail flukes, dolphins, as well as dugongs. So these are some of the things that we can fundraise by supporting other people as well, local livelihoods, but also because it's linked to culture and heritage, and it's linked to the species that we study, we keep it on people's tongues. We get people to talk about how unique these products are, and really the merchandise development is some of the things I'm really proud of that we've been able to do. Another way to fundraise with a difference, while trying to support the work that we do is that we now do these marine excursions that we offer to the public called A Day Out with Dolphins and Dolphin Researchers. So it's not your typical dolphin watching trip per se, because we take them out on the boat and it's a fully guided tour where we try to get people to experience a little bit of what it's like to be on a research vessel to do the work that we do. So they can see that they can see what are the kind of things that happens on a research vessel when we're trying to study dolphins, and we give them information about the area, about the dolphins, based on information that we have collected through the research that we do. So we found that it's a really nice way to engage with people, for them to gain a better understanding of a day in the life of a dolphin researcher, and to gain appreciation for these animals that we work with as well. So I've been talking for a really long time, and I'm nearly at the end. And so just in summary, what has it been like for us here doing research and conservation on a shoestring? It's been it's been 10 years, 11 years this year since we started out. And we started out as just Farrell and myself. You can see that we've managed to do quite a bit, often really on a very small budget. So every last cent is put to good use. So what has it really been? You'll see this shoestring here, or a string, and it has many loops and kinks in it. And it really is to illustrate that the journey hasn't been smooth, but I would say it's been really worth it. And I'm so glad to be able to share this story with you. So again, it starts with dreams. You have a dream, please pursue it. You have an ambition, please go for it. Ignore the naysayers because they are often wrong. And then when you have no information, one of the first things you have to do is research. But try not to get caught up in getting too fancy. Of course, when you're on a budget, you can't get too fancy. So focus first on the important basics, and try to understand what's happening in the area before you zoom in on some of the more complex issues that you need to look at. Build up the portfolio and keep knocking on doors. This is one of the things that we had to work really hard, especially in the early years, to really build the portfolio of Mariset, to get people to come in to understand and know about the work that we do, to try and raise that portfolio of marine mammals, because there was so much lack of awareness and understanding about these animals in Malaysian waters. So we had to work really, really hard. And keep knocking on doors. There will be many doors that don't open, many doors that slam shut, but just keep knocking. They will eventually open. Gather volunteers. Volunteers are so important. They really form the core of our workforce. We are forever indebted to volunteers. But also, you never know who you could pick up to join your team from these volunteers. There will be a shining star or two amongst the people who come through to help you. So never underestimate the power of volunteers. Build a team, right? It can't be a one-man show or a two-man show forever. So build a team and fill the niches in the organization. Growth is necessary, and what we learned is that it was good to build a team, a local team, and to sort of build on what people were capable of, and as well as their personal interests. Always remember to translate that science into marine education, and this can be done at relatively low cost. Of course, with more budget, you can do more, but and then now in a Zoom era, this can be done quite easily as well over the internet. Always remember to translate the science and train the local community so that they have a good understanding of what's happening in terms of the work that you do, and to also assist you with these conservation and research efforts. Remember to fundraise smartly and innovatively. Sometimes research grants will only take you so far. They're very competitive. The amounts are not always a lot. So we always have to learn to keep ourselves afloat, to stay ahead, to be able to keep doing this work. We have to fundraise smartly and innovatively. Don't forget to tap into the power of social media to share your research findings to a wider audience, to get people to understand, to be aware of ongoing issues, fun facts about these cetaceans that you've learned, or even for any topic really, but just to capitalize on, not capitalize, but to just sort of, harness the power of social media. Never forget to ensure that your science is translated into policy instruments as well, so that the decision makers are able to have that information to develop conservation and management plans, and so that your work would have contributed to a much bigger cause than the work itself. And always remember to keep the research going. It's important to have science as the base of this work, to do conservation based on evidence. And so keep the research going, but to innovate efforts. And what do I mean by that? Now we're in a pandemic world, and at some point we will be in a post-pandemic world. And when we enter into a post-pandemic world, the world has changed. It's already changed now, economically, socially, culturally. To some extent, it's changed. And priorities might have changed because many people were impacted by the pandemic. So it is very important to innovate the efforts to ensure that the animals that you want to protect, the habitats that you want to protect, can remain relevant in current society settings, and that you're able to still do the conservation work while taking into account what's happened, and that people might be having different priorities of survival. And really keep doing it, and keep doing all of this with a lot of hard work, with a dedicated team. You can make positive impact on, or more and more, even on a shoestring. So one of the mantras that Maricet holds quite closely is that we always want to advocate our findings, as I just mentioned. And I always like to quote this short article, So You Want to Be a Jedi? It says, in the best sense, advocating for conservation science simply means ensuring its results gets into the hands of relevant people in a format that is clearly understandable. It is simply communicating science to a wide and appropriate audience. And so this is one of the things that we always tell ourselves and remind ourselves at Maricet, that this is what we need to do, that we have to ensure that our science gets out there to a wide and appropriate audience. We are facing many unprecedented environmental challenges caused by unsustainable human practices. Advocating for your science is not easy. You may face many trials, as we've known, and may not see any academic reward. But to quote Albus Dumbledore, dark times lie ahead of us, and there will be a time when we must choose between what is easy and what is right. And so I hope this inspires you out there to chase after your dream and to ensure that your conservation work, whatever it may be, reaches a wide audience, so that we can have wider collective impact in this world. And since this is all about cetaceans today, and we all here must love cetaceans and whales, I thought I would end with Pierce Brosnan's quote, "We owe it to our children to be better stewards of the environment. Because the alternative is a world without whales, and that's just too terrible to imagine." And I imagine that with most, if not all of us here today being cetacean enthusiasts, we definitely can't imagine a world without whales. I know I can't. So this is another reminder of why we do what we continue to do, because I want a world with whales, dolphins, dugongs, porpoises, and all kinds of marine mammals swimming in our seas. So what's next? Speaking of whales, what's next on the horizon? We will continue doing the work that we've been doing, but knowing that there are whales out there just offshore from Langkawi where we work, we're working really hard now to secure funding to be able to study these animals, to understand their ecology and to understand their conservation needs. Because just because they're offshore, it doesn't mean out of sight, out of mind. They are exposed to the threats of human activities as well. And again, when we think Malaysia and marine life, whales are one of the last things that come to people's minds. And so we have whales next on our horizon to study and discover further. And I think that's it. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much again to the American Cetacean Society for having me here today, to Uko and Sabina especially for inviting me. And none of this work that we have done all these years would have been possible without the support of many family, friends, and colleagues and collaborators who believed in us and supported us. So thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Louisa. Your passion and it really shines through. So it's your enthusiasm. So there's a lot of takeaways for all of us. So we really appreciate it. Unfortunately, you went a little over your allotted time, and we're sort of at a closing time. So I apologize for that. And so, but I
apologize for that.
You've communicated your most effectively. You've everything. If anything, it makes me want to pack my suitcases and come visit you and see these wonderful porpoises and dolphins. So you've given us a wonderful insight of the research that you're doing and with your organization, Marisat. So I'm sure we'll hear more of you. So thank you. We're going to be closing. Thank you again. Thank you, Louisa. Appreciate it. And we'll move on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.